Welcome to the latest episode of my new podcast, That's Not Basketball. I'm your host, Teigan, and in this podcast, we will dive into the similarities and differences between school and AAU basketball. Today, we will be focusing on AAU, and later in the episode, we will have Mr. Teddy Peet on the show to gain some insight on his perspective as the coach, organizer, and founder of the AAU program, City of Lights. I started playing AAU basketball in 6th grade after moving from my little town travel team to an AAU team called L-Town, and I practiced with them for months, and I missed a lot of their tournaments. I only ended up going to one, but it was my first experience of AAU basketball, and I would say it was an all-right experience. It wasn't the best. Practices, we would have like 2-hour practices, and we would spend like an hour and 15 minutes on like conditioning, and we'd spend like half hour actually playing or working on plays. So practices really sucked. I hated going to them because it was just all running and not actual playing basketball, which what I was trying to go there for, basketball, not conditioning. The one tournament, it was okay. Like, it was my first tournament. I was really nervous, so I really didn't play very well anyways, but I think we lost like all of our games, and the coaches brought down people from the older team to play with us, so like they were taking our playing time, and it was interesting. But anyways, from after that I stopped playing for them just because I didn't feel like it was the best experience for me. And so then after that I played with City of Light, which I am currently playing for, and I really have enjoyed my experience. That first year and this year, my dad was coaching, and we had a really good team last year, and this year, our team is really good again. And we've gone to so many tournaments, and it's always so much fun because of like the connections I have made through that with different coaches and different players that I'm playing with, and I feel like I've gotten so much better because of it. And I also played for a fall of my 8th grade year with a team out of Rochester called RSBA, and I went to a couple tournaments. It was okay. I didn't get really a whole lot of playing time, but it was still fun, and practices were once a week, so I'd go to Rochester with one of my friends who also played for that team, and it was really good competition because they were really, really good players on that team. And so I think it was a good experience because I experienced a new level of basketball that I wasn't used to, or at least playing with a new level. Like, the competition wasn't always the best where we played, but because it was still fall ball, AAU is really, like, the great tournaments are really in spring. So my best memories have to be from City of Light. Last season, there was a tournament in Penn State where everyone on my team was just playing amazing. Like, my teammate Kyler was grabbing like 12, 15 rebounds per game. Nolan and Carter were just shooting threes out of their mind and making everything. At one game, Nolan had like a 50-point game, and I had like 15 assists because he could just not miss. And we won that championship because of our big man made an and one put back for the championship, which the free throw sealed it for us. So that was probably my favorite tournament I've been to. So there are definitely benefits of playing AAU basketball, especially if you're looking for kind of benefits for yourself. Playing more basketball, obviously you get more game film, and a lot of basketball recruiting is recruit-led. So basically what I mean by that is the player is the one that reaches out to coaches and sends out their film, unless they're just like amazing. Then they're obviously getting reached out to. But yeah, there's more game film to send to coaches, and also sometimes there are, not super often, but if you're at the bigger tournaments, there might be scouts from colleges. And when you go to those tournaments, you get on mailing lists and you get invites to camps from different colleges, so you can get exposures through that. And obviously something that gets you better at basketball is playing more basketball. So if you're used to all type of different game situations from playing more games in the spring, you'll be more ready for different situations in the school season. And also, like AAU, it keeps me playing basketball. You practice once or twice a week throughout the spring. You're getting good reps for the most part. For my team, we get good reps because we spend a lot of our practices on like basic stuff that can be applied to anywhere, no matter what offense or what type of basketball it is. Like we start off with fundamental skill work, like a lot of ball handling, a lot of shooting. Then we work on like different reads, like coming off screens, if you're fading the screen or curling the screen, or you're just playing it straight up, and a lot of defensive techniques. And then we just play. And obviously, something that gets you better at playing basketball is playing basketball. So if you're not playing, then what are you doing? I think that's definitely very helpful. AAU also pins you up against and with really good competition because the team you're playing with is all the best players from your area and areas around you, and you're playing against teams which are made up of players that are all the best in their areas. So it's really cool that you're able to be pushed against really good competition with really good competition on your team, which makes you better. And also, when you're playing with different coaches, you can hear new and different ideas about basketball from different people or coaches, even if their advice isn't correct. I still think it's a benefit because you should be able to differentiate between what is good and what is bad, and the good stuff you add to your game, and the bad stuff you remember it, but don't add it. You can learn a new move, or you can learn a new idea of how to guard a screen, or a new idea of help side, or a new offense to run, which I think can help your basketball IQ. Even just thinking, all right, what do I think I can apply, and what do I think is good advice, and what shouldn't I apply, because why is this maybe not the best advice? So obviously with everything there are positives and negatives, and there are definitely negatives to AAU basketball. I did say there was good competition, but you'll run into teams that aren't always good competition, and the different teams at the different tournaments. And it can be a waste of time because you can go in and beat people by 20 or 30 points, and that's not necessarily making you much better. Anyways, sometimes I know Coach Johnson mentions this in the last episode that when you play too many games, the games mean less. And I feel like sometimes I've felt that, having all the different games and knowing, all right, next weekend I'm going to have 3 more games which aren't affected by the last 3. It can kind of take away a competitive edge, like needing to win to continue, which is I've started going there, but I always try and get myself back to the I want to win. I'm a very competitive person, and I don't just want to win, I want to beat people, and I don't want to go away from that ever, because that's when I play my best. Also, you care too much about individual things, like stats. Like you care a lot about how many points you score, and the thing you're thinking about in your head is, all right, what can I do to score, and not what the team need to do in order to win the game. Again, Coach Johnson mentioned last episode about school basketball. You're playing for the name on the front of your jersey instead of the name on your back, where in AAU it can definitely go towards the playing for the name on the back. I talked about it being a positive, getting advice, but some coaches may just teach you wrong advice, and you may not always know when it's good or bad, or what advice is good or bad, so you can accidentally add something that is a bad trait to your game that is not going to help you. The style of play of an AAU, it really depends on who you're playing with and where you're playing. And a lot of times the rep that AAU gets is just running gun basketball, just cherry picking and reaching for steals, just going down and making one pass and shooting some shot that's contested. But that's not the way I want to play, and it's not the way that my coaches want me to play most of the time. Well, I know for my coach, who happens to be my dad, he does not want us to play that way, because he was a high school coach, and he also is open to ideas. So he wants us to just move the ball and try and get the best shot we can, which is the best basketball you can try and play. I think AAU basketball can definitely be better. I've noticed and I've heard from coaches who've been around AAU for a while is that AAU has been significantly watered down competition-wise, and that means like a lot of players who necessarily aren't great basketball players are getting on AAU teams because they want to play basketball, which is nice for them because it's an opportunity for them to play. But, that's when you run into teams that you're beating by 30 and 40. There's times that teams will sign up for tournaments that are way above their level, and it's not good for anyone. It's not good for the team you're playing against. It's not good for your team. It's not good for your program. It's not good for the tournament. It kind of takes away from what AAU can be. Yeah, the competition is watered down with people who want to play basketball and actual basketball players. And there's a big difference between basketball players and people who want to play basketball. Basketball players are the people that are putting in the work. They're playing for their school team. They're probably one of the best on their school team, and they're just getting more games in AAU. And there's people that want to play basketball that got cut from their school team, and they want to have an opportunity to play basketball, which is nice in a sense for them, but I don't know. It's not always best for everyone. It would be nice if coaches were all certified and you can always trust what they say. Again, going back to the advice part, knowing that you're getting taught the right thing, it would be really awesome all the time for a lot of people, because I know, I feel like I've been around basketball enough and some very good coaches that I can kind of tell what advice I should listen to and what advice I should hear, but maybe consider it and then, I don't know, throw it out if I don't think it's great. I know that for NCAA live events, coaches have to be certified. There's an online certification process where you have to watch a lot of videos and complete questionnaires, which is all right. I don't know if there's any better way to do it, and it definitely, for how broad AAU is and tournaments that call themselves AAU that are just tournaments all around, but it'd be hard. Ideally, there would be a way for coaches to be all certified, but I don't know if that's necessarily realistic. And I also wish that there was a better way of pairing teams that are evenly matched. You're never winning by 50, you're never losing by 50, because winning or losing by that much and that much of a margin, it does not help you or whoever you're playing against. There was a tournament a couple weeks ago with my team, and we went to an A-game tournament at Spooky Nook, which is a large tournament, and we were in the B or C division. So there was one or two divisions that were better competition that were higher than us, and each division has its own championship. So we lost our first game, but on the second day, we won 2 games, and then we played well and got into the playoffs after winning. And then we ran into this team, and we got beat by our best player within 5 minutes of the game. He went up for a layup and landed wrong in his ankle, and he couldn't play. And we were already short-staffed because we just didn't have people. So we had 5 people that were playing in that game, and we lost by 40 to this team from Virginia Beach or whatever. And their closest game was a 30-point game, which is not fair. What's the point of going to a tournament just to beat people by 30? That's not making you better. That's not pushing yourself. They should have been in the division higher, and it would have just been better for everyone. That's all I have to say, so let's move on to the next segment with an interview with Teddy Peet to get another point of view coming from the AAU side of the basketball world. Did you play basketball in high school? If so, where?
I did. I played at Thomas Edison, and I graduated in 2001.
Did you ever play AAU basketball?
I did 1 year of AAU basketball heading into my senior season.
And where was that?
It was based in Corning, New York.
What was it called?
What were they? The Stars? The Stars, I want to say. Coach Hopkins was the coach.
Would you say that AAU then was similar to how it is now?
Absolutely not.
No?
No.
What's the differences?
So, I don't want it to sound derogatory or watered down now, but essentially back then you had to be really, really good to get on a team. Basically, there was only one team for your little area, and if you weren't one of the 8 best guys around, you were not going to be able to play.
Yeah.
So now there's options for you to play. Now there's every other 15 minutes away in every direction you could get on a team in your age group. So
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier in the podcast because one time I heard Lou Judson, the coach at Waverly, talk about how if you were playing AAU like 20 years ago, that's where the college prospects were going. If you're going to play college basketball, that's where you'd play.
yeah, he's not wrong.
Yeah. So, how long have you been coaching / running AAU basketball?
So I've been coaching AAU basketball since my son Nick was in 3rd grade. So he is 16 now. I think that puts him in 8. So 8 years, I'd say the last 8 years I've been coaching AAU basketball.
Okay. And so, where and at what levels have you coached basketball?
So started in the rec level, just Nicholas was 4, and I wanted to help out with the Elmira Small Fry, and then I ended up coaching in Horsehead Small Fry and Southport Rec, and I think I coached everywhere I possibly could because I was one of those guys who was a junkie for it. When Nick was in 3rd grade, I decided to start an AAU team, and we were Fusion, named after the church that we attended at the time, and they had a girls' fusion program. And we started a boys team. It had to be a 5th grade boys team, even though we had 1 5th grader, a couple 4th graders, and the majority were 3rd graders. Yeah. But we couldn't find, competition and stuff like that. So we started then, and so I've gone from 3rd grade AAU up to 17U coaching across the last 8-10 years, whatever.
So
it is.
just following wherever Nick is, pretty much, and
then going above. When we started City of Lights a couple years ago, the intent was just to have 2 teams, and it was going to be a team that I coached that had Gavin on it, and you were going to play up on that team. Nick was going to play up on that team, and we were going to have a couple kids playing up, and then we were going to have a team for Cole and the Proud Feet, and then, as we had branched off onto our own,
3 years later,
a couple more people came along then, and it ended up all right. Well, we needed somebody to coach 17s because they needed a 17, so I coached 17s then, while Nick was in 7th grade. So so gone the gambit.
So outside of just playing high school, have you ever been involved with or coached, like with a school basketball team?
Yes. So when I played for 5 years on the Marine Corps basketball team while I was in. And through that, I met a plethora of coaches. But one of the things I learned in the Corps that made the most practical sense for me, and I've applied it to pretty much everything in my life, is that the more you know, the more valuable you are. So I was always, even when I was doing just the rec stuff, I was always the coach who went and got Play 60 certified or USA. Now I'm a USA Gold certified coach. Your dad is as well. All of our COL coaches that coach live events have to be USA certified gold. Other than that, I just tried to get underneath some of the best leaders I've ever been around in my life, whether it was coaching, whether it was mentoring, whether it was in business or school. Constantly try to learn and get underneath a mentor that will push you to grow.
So what is that certification process like for the USA?
The USA Gold certification is a bit tedious. We'll put it that way. Essentially, you've got to watch about 9 hours worth of videos to make sure that you're not a predator, to make sure that you're understanding the difference between instructional, educational, recreational, all the different levels and facets of it. And it's just qualifying you to be able to lead young men or young women in athletic basketball competition.
Okay. So why did you want to be involved with AAU initially, and what keeps you involved now?
Good question, T. So initially it was my son wanted to pursue something. So you want to give him as many opportunities as you can. So initially I didn't want to coach anymore. When I stopped after he did the 3rd grade team, I stopped for a couple of years, a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, until he decided he wanted to come back and play again. And I didn't want to coach. I didn't want to coach AAU basketball. Yeah. I wanted to be a dad, but there was a need, and somebody had to step up and fill it. And I decided that I was probably the most qualified for it in that situation, so I did. At least that's how I felt. And then from that situation on, keep growing, continue to grow, continue to develop, continue to get better, because as I walked this out, it became very fulfilling. became very fulfilling to see kids achieve their goals, achieve their dreams, and to be able to play a very small, minute background piece of it became something that was very rewarding for me. So, yeah, I've been doing it since then and enjoyed it immensely.
So it grew from wanting to help your son to just seeing different kids in the community like be part of the game and helping their growth.
Absolutely, yeah. I wanted to help my son, wanted to help their growth, and it was very rewarding spiritually, very rewarding, motivationally wise. It just gave me a reason to really dive in and just I got immense joy out of seeing others reach goals that they'd set for themselves. And I knew growing up that I didn't have a lot of people in my life who helped me get to my goals and that kind of stuff. There were a few people actually who helped me along that way, and a lot of them were coaches. Your dad being one of them, actually. And so if I could kind of repay a little bit everything that I was blessed with, it's definitely a big part of it as well.
That's great. What do you think about school basketball compared to AAU basketball?
I think there has been a shift from night and day from when I was in school to what school basketball is now. Essentially back then, AAU was very, very select and very, very, but it wasn't a money-making branding, circuit that had become a pipeline to directly funnel colleges. It had been grassroots. Now it is a system. It is no different than, you want your child to go to this college because they want to be this specialty or this profession. So this school specializes in that. The AAU circuit, the EYBL, the Three Stripes, all of those have become just the course of action that you have to take if you want to achieve that kind of level of competition and achieve that level of success for basketball. So it's changed dramatically. In comparison to high school, we're back in high school, you used to get recruited a lot from high school. If you were a player of the year for the state, no matter what the class was, or if you had led a team onto a deep state title run or a playoff run and whatnot, or had absolutely overwhelming dominant numbers or something like that at your high school, you could really get noticed from it. And now college coaches don't recruit as much from there because why would I want to trudge to Corning, New York to watch one kid potentially play when I can drive the same distance on a Saturday and see 300 of those kids? So it's taken over the recruitment process.
How would you describe the actual style of play of school ball compared to AAU?
That's some good questions. School ball is much more structured in its sense, in that typically you have a coach or coaches who have a system that they are very knowledgeable in, and that they have run for some time, or they know how to run with a proficiency. So they have to find the square peg for the square hole that they have in their system. And freestyling off of that, they don't have much flexibility because they have to work with the talent pool that they're given. Where AAU, you're typically inheriting a large group of athletes from a multitude of different schools and trying to blend their style together. So I look at high school as it's very structured, it's very mundane to some degree. You can take a tremendous athlete and bury him in a system, and he doesn't look as special as he actually is in a high school system. Whereas in AAU, you can really isolate the star power in certain situations, but you don't have as much structure. You need structure in certain things. You need to have the ability to be able to know, all right, if the defense is doing this, this is what we're going to fall back and do. If they're throwing this at us, this is what we're going to do. If they're scoring on us this way, here's how we make the adjustment. Those kind of things. You got to have sets and you got to have fallbacks, but really you become more dependent on the athleticism or the skill of the player as opposed to the success of the system in high school.
Yeah. So obviously school basketball has been around a lot longer than AAU, and AAU is constantly changing, like you mentioned, even in the last 20 to 30 years. So how do you think that AAU has impacted the style of play on school basketball, or maybe the how players want to play for the high school coaches?
I think that I don't know if it's AAU. I'll say this, that oftentimes the lowest levels of sport will end up being what you see at the highest level when that level grade of athlete gets there. So everybody says, it's a copycat league and this kind of stuff. Well, the three ball became more successful and has changed the game based on Steph Curry.
Mm-hmm.
He had freedom to do these kind of things in AAU. He never had them in high school, So it has changed the players. The players emulate what they see on TV, and they're allowed to do so in an AAU format, which is contradictory to what they're allowed to do in a high school format. And I think that at times it can cause frustration between the player and the coach, and the coach and the player.
Yeah.
I think it could cause frustration for the parents who've seen their kids excel on an AAU stage and then look like they can't get off the end of the bench in a high school setting, and it's frustrating for their parent to sit and watch. So I think it's going to take both sides agreeing to that there's change needed for any kind of real growth or impact to take place, for it to stop being barriers built against one another, AAU versus high school ball, as opposed to bridges where we can connect the two.
Mm-hmm. If you could change one thing about AAU, what would it be?
The standard at which officials officiate the game, because that is probably the most problematic part of AAU altogether, because you cannot get that consistency that you get from a high school game. I've said it all along. I don't care if the officials are bad for both teams. At least they're consistent. Yeah. And you tend not to get that in AAU.
Yeah.
Every now and then you'll run into what looks like a great crew of officials, and man, they run a tight court. They don't let they don't let anything slide by or any of that kind of stuff. And you really appreciate that aspect of the game when you get it in AAU, because it's so inconsistent. Other than that, now, having watched a few of our guys over the last couple of years play on the EYBL and the EYCL and three stripes and this kind of stuff, I do see that at the utmost premier level in AAU and the EYBL, the officiating is much better.
Yeah.
It's very consistent. It's very structured. It's very disciplined. So that would be the one thing I could fix, if we could get it more at this grassroots level or the intermediate level.
Yeah, I would like that.
Yeah, I'm sure all of you guys would.
If you could change one thing about school basketball, what would it be?
Ooh. Well, I don't pull punches, so I would say the barrier that the majority of high school coaches build around themselves. In my opinion, as I said earlier, you have to have a bridge between the two. We've tried very hard at City of Lights to be a bridge to all of our local high schools and say, hey man, we'll run your stuff, we'll work your systems, we'll build them in. Just work with us, tell us what you want, and we'll try to build those basketball players for you. But in the end, I think there's some stigmas that are associated with AAU basketball, and many people don't look at it as, there's qualified people coaching it, or there's qualified individuals teaching the game and that kind of stuff. So therefore, I think it's very blocked off from the high school coach perspective. So I'd break down the silos if I could change it.
Yeah. So what is it like to coach many different players who are all used to playing a certain play style with their high school coaches?
I'll say this. One thing that's often disappointing is getting athletes who are coming out of their high school basketball season and they're out of shape. And I think that is a big emphasis for myself personally. For what I like to see is, I'd like the players to be in better shape, but when they come in and they have this systematic mindset, I'm okay with it, but you got to be willing to just add something to your system.
Yeah.
If it's that unwillingness that I don't like, typically when a kid comes in and it's like, we don't do, that's not what my high school coach said to me. And I'm like, okay, many different ways to see this game.
Mm-hmm.
And how they see it is how they see it there, and how I'll see it is how I'll see it.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle is probably a really good solution or a byproduct that could come if we are able to merge them together. And that's all I'm trying to get kids to do, is buy into, hey, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was an instance a couple weeks ago at a practice where you were teaching a footwork move in the corner that I didn't necessarily agree with.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I still listened. I still tried it. And, I'm keeping that in mind. I'm not just going to throw that out. Like, I'm open-minded to new ideas. And I think players who aren't willing need to realize that if they want to play in the college level, that college coach is going to tell them, like, you can't get married to a certain way of playing, because that college coach is going to tell you to forget everything you know and just teach you a whole new way.
That people do business with who they like. That is a sales mantra that I've lived through. As a coach, I've tried to apply that mantra to my relationship with the players. All right, I want to be considered a player's coach, but I want you to be able to, because I need the player to be able to give me feedback. Feedback is the lifeblood of everything.
Yeah.
You get better by getting feedback, no matter what the case is, no matter what it is. And if you have a bad dialogue back and forth with a kid, a bad relationship and those kind of things where they don't want to hear something from you, or you don't even want to validate what they have to say, because that's not going to be healthy, and no one's going to get better. That kid's not going to get better from my coaching, and then I'm not going to become a better coach from learning from that athlete because the communication's not there. So that's a great point. You know what I mean? If you disagree with something, that's great. There's okay. But do it like this right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. That's it. That shows you have the ability to still follow instructions, even if you disagree with it. And at the worst case scenario, you learn something. Hey, I learned I don't do this well, or I learned that I don't like that. It's okay.
All right. So that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. In this episode, we once again discussed how AAU is different from school basketball. It was very interesting to hear a viewpoint that comes from the opposite side of the spectrum. As someone who plays AAU, I really enjoy getting to stay playing and practicing basketball in the offseason and continuing to get better. It's safe to say that AAU and school basketball are different, and some people within the basketball community believe AAU basketball isn't what it could be, or they may think it just isn't quality basketball. Other people may say school basketball needs to change and improve, but we will get into that on the next episode of That's Not Basketball. Again, thanks to Teddy Peet for coming on the podcast today, and as always, thank you for listening. Basketball is awesome.